Hello and welcome. This is Mouse Gunner, and we're back with some more Automation, the car company tycoon game. Now, I've long wanted to make a post-war European-styled people's car, something in the vein of a Volkswagen Beetle or a Fiat 500. And now that we have the rear-mounted engines, I feel like I finally can do that. So, in this build, I am role playing a Spanish car company. Now, it doesn't really matter that it's a Spanish car company, it could really be any European country. But the model I'm building is the Siva. Now, this is kind of a joke of my own, in that you had the Chevy Nova, and the joke was that the Nova didn't sell very well in Spanish speaking countries because Nova means no go. So we have done a kind of play on words with Siva, as in yes go, the opposite of the Nova. And we have two trims, the Normal and the Supremo. And the body we chose is the smaller of the two choices we have, as we are trying to build a people's car here. Now for the chassis, we went with ladder, as it is the only choice, steel, and rear longitudinal. As I said, rear mounted engine, what this is all about. McPherson strut in the front and McPherson strut in the rear. Historically, that's not accurate. McPherson strut didn't exist until the early 50s. But I think it's maybe a little bit more appropriate than going with double wishbone. In any case, panel material is steel. Now, as far as the styling goes, I went with kind of a pastel yellow. We'll just do kind of a 360-degree view here. Pretty simple. All right. Let's go ahead and hop into the engine. Now, this is a very small displacement engine under only 800cc. And for the, it's a 4-cylinder engine, cast iron, push rod for the valve train, and it is made out of a cast iron as well for the head. For the pistons, we're cast across the board. You know, engines from this period of time, 1946, not really all that complex. You don't have a whole lot of choices. And they also tend to fall apart on you if you push them too hard, so you can't have much in the compression numbers. Here we only have 7. Cam profile is set at 40. You can't take these things too high up into the revs or they just start to fall apart. Now, with a small displacement engine like this, we don't have as much mass, so we can get away with a little bit more higher revs, but you can't get too crazy with engines of this period. Naturally aspirated, as it is the only choice. A single barrel carburetor, again the only choice here, and we're only using a single carb. And we have a standard intake, and regular leaded is the fuel choice. I went with the fuel mixture all the way lean, as I tend to do, and the ignition timing up to 46. RPM limit is at 5,400, which seemingly was where our peak performance index came in. We do have a little bit of valve float issues with this, and as I said, engine this period, and pushrod engines especially, can't really take all that many revs. We have cast log. We're trying to keep this engine simple and cheap. Single exhaust, very small exhaust diameter. This is a small engine, and only one baffled muffler to kind of keep the noise down. Without it, it's a little bit noisy of an engine. Probably we could get away with it, but we'll let it go with the one baffled muffler. All right, and the overall performance we get is 31.6 horsepower and 39.8 foot-pounds of torque. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually pretty respectable for the time period. But you also have to consider for the time period there was a lot of side valve engines still around. So we have a little bit of a performance boost by having a pushrod engine. I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's the case. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the setup. So for the top speed, we have a 3-speed manual. I set the top speed pretty much right on the estimated top speed. We're using this more for acceleration. I mean, geez, this thing 0 to 62 is slow as crap. You want to try and get it as good as you can. These are, just barely able to do highway speeds, and that's pretty much at the very limits of the top speed of this vehicle. And the spacing has been moved around a little bit to adjust for wheel spin and what have you. Now for the tire setup, I went with hard long life road because I want this thing to have a very long, running time. I don't want a lot of uh, running costs for the consumer to maintain it. So we have the hard long life road on there as standard. Rim diameter is at 11. That's pretty small. A wheel diameter, I meant to bring this down. Let's go ahead and do that. I think 535 or actually 540 is probably where we want it. Although, yeah, okay. I think I messed up the tire width. It's very important with the tire width that you have it this way. If you make the front tires any wider, you start having a little bit of issues. As you see, our drivability is starting to really drop. And then eventually you have massive oversteer and real big penalties. So you're going to have it be skinnier in the front. I don't know how realistic that would be to a car of this type, but that's what it's asking us to do. We do have some rim offset, though, for a little bit of extra stability, as well as filling out our wheel wells nicely. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the brakes. There's not a whole lot of choices here. Drum brakes, big as they can get. We still have quite a bit of brake fade to contend with, unfortunately, but that's the way things are. Under tray, none. And the cooling airflow, I went with 20 above the norm, as I wanted a little bit extra reliability for this vehicle. We have 5 seats, and standard interior, no entertainment, and standard safety. Now for the suspension, standard twin tube passive, pretty much the only choices. And as per what I normally do, I went with the normal preset, but I did quite a bit of tweaking after that to work with the suspension and get it to perform a little bit better. And let's go ahead and look at our numbers. So we have detailed stats, we have drivability, sportiness, comfort, prestige, safety, and let's get to our test track and get the right track selected. So our top speed is at 72.1 miles an hour. As I said, barely able to do highway speeds. We've got our 0 to 62 time of 27.6 seconds, so apocalyptically slow. Cornering G's, not all that great either. This thing doesn't corner all that well. But we are going to go ahead and do our track time anyway. I imagine it's going to be really darn slow. And just to save ourselves the wait, let's go ahead and stop it and look at our time. So we've got 2 minutes and 13 seconds, 0.59. Now I do have one more trim, but before we do that, let's go ahead and go to our markets tab. Now I haven't yet set this up, but the market that I have in mind would be Fruinia, which I think is supposed to be Europe. So let's see what that says here. So we've got a small, hilly, coastal, medium wealth country with narrow average quality roads, average purchasing power, low weather harshness, average taxes and running costs, high eco-awareness, and high fuel prices. Now, that's more of a modern Europe in my mind, and maybe not so applicable to 1946, but I still think it is more what we're looking for, especially that hilly part. I mean, if you're talking about Spain, Spain is very hilly and mountainous in spots, so I think that is appropriate. And also, I think we need a 5% markup. And with that, we can see some of the things that it does well. So we've got city economy, pretty darn good. Matter of fact, we're scoring very well with our competitiveness. One thing we're not scoring very well with is affordability, but when you consider the time period, I think that actually makes quite a bit of sense. A lot of people wouldn't be able to afford a car at this point in time. Not anything like what we have in modern times. I don't know if the years really take that into account, but I'm going to assume that it is. So although we're very competitive in the family budget market, where our pricing is just not within the affordability range of our the people in this market segment. And coming out of the war, that kind of makes sense. All right, with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at our other trim. And the main difference we're going to have with this trim is just a different engine. So we've got the Supremo, which has the 0.8. Ooh, I guess this wasn't set up correctly. It should be the 0.8S engine. Huh. I think it was set up correctly before. It just didn't save correctly for some reason because the gearbox and everything is set up correctly for this engine. Just make sure we double click that save it because for some reason it didn't save the correct engine. But in any case, let's go ahead and maybe if I go back to the model and go to here, and because this is normally where you select the engine, just double make sure of that and hit save. Maybe that will save it this time. In any case, the trim. The main difference we're going to have here is the gearbox because of the different engine, which we should look at. So the main difference with the engine is, we go to the fuel system, we have twin single barrel carbs. And for our exhaust, we have a short cast header with a wider exhaust diameter. This is going to allow us to have I say quite a bit, but a decent improvement in our power, 40 horsepower. And the end result of that, we go back to our trim, and we will be changing the dynamics of our gearbox to amount for that change in power. But we have a quicker 0 to 62 time. It's still apocalyptically slow, but it's a little bit better. And if we go down the line, nothing else is really going to change. The setup is more or less the same. We're going to have more brake fade, obviously, as we're requiring more out of the engine. Not the engine, the car. Now, the cooling airflow, I kept the same, but it's still within that 10 I usually go for, so I'm perfectly happy with that. And let's go ahead and just jump ahead to the test track. And we see that we're at 78.6 miles an hour, so improvement here. We already talked about our 0 to 62. And our handling actually looks a little bit better. So let's look at the time. And we improved it to 2 minutes, 8 seconds, 0.89. So an improvement of almost 5 seconds. Let's go ahead and look at our detailed stats as I haven't done that yet. So we have drivability, sportiness, comfort, prestige, safety, and finally, let's go to our markets tab. Now we're going to also have to select Ruinia here and our 5% markup, which is what we normally go for. And we're going to have a lot of changes on who is now enjoying our car more or who is finding our car more competitive because of that difference in the power. But we still see a lot of the same dynamics, and this does score very well on a lot of areas. I mean, you see how many things are green here. I mean, this is getting 85 points in family budget. So although it's not being highlighted, it still scores very well in a lot of market segments. And that is, I think, really accurate to what we see in real life. I mean, the Volkswagen Beetle and the Fiat 500 were some of the highest selling cars of all time. And you can see here that so many market segments enjoy it that I think that we would also have that parallel in the game. But in any case, we see the same dynamic, though, where a lot of people like our car, find it very competitive, but affordability-wise, not very many people can afford it. In areas where you're talking about like track cars, budget track cars, yeah, more people can afford it. But And as a result, we're getting pretty good scores here. But I think it's more appropriate for the family budget or the other budget-minded categories here. But it's just a matter of how many can really afford it. In any case, let's go ahead and now that we have everything saved on up, let's go ahead and do our little bit of a comparison here with our model. And between the two, we get more or less the same drivability numbers. I know there's a little bit of rounding here. We get more sportiness with the Supremo, which makes perfect sense. More comfort with the Normal. As far as prestige, again, it goes in the favor of the Supremo. Safety is going to be roughly the same. Fuel economy is going to go for the Normal, which makes sense. It's not as powerful of an engine. So, and this engine was set up more aggressively. I don't know if I pointed out when I was showing some of the differences, but I was under the fuel tab. I made the fuel also burn a lot richer, which is a big reason why the fuel economy is worse here. Technically, the twin carb setup should have made the economy better, but by burning the fuel mixture being more rich, that's where you get that difference. Weight's not going to be all that much different, although it is going to be heavier for the Supremo, and that makes sense. You have more carburetors. There you go. And cost, again, goes along those lines, as well as time of manufacture. In any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed a little bit different role play this time around and the video. This is Mouse Gunner signing out.